Good morning and welcome to the AutoTalk Weekly Wrap, episode 50. And joining me today is my usual guest, Graham McDonald. Graham, thanks for joining us.
Morning. Good to be back again. It's been a little while, Richard.
It has. I think we were kind of hoping to do something a little bit special for our 50th, but it just didn't quite seem to pan out. And a few things, I got sick and everyone got sick and holidays
Easter.
and all that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
we just...
Yeah.
I kind of figured we needed to get back into it. So it is special being our 50th. I am broadcasting, as you can see, from the auction room at TSS Osaka, and
TAA it might be actually, or is it
TAA,
USS?
sorry,
I think, Richard. That's USS Osaka.
Well, I think the joke lies in there, Graham, that it's TSS Osaka as far as I'm concerned today. So.
Potato, potato.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, Graham is broadcasting live from exotic Henderson in a portacom on a commercial yard.
Not a portacom, I'll have you know. This is a fully fledged commercial office building. None of this portacom crap out here.
Could it be picked up and put on a truck?
Legally, yes. Careful what I say there.
It's Henderson, though.
But it's not a portacom. Don't go there. Don't say that.
It's not a portacom TM.
It's a semi-transportable building is the best way of putting it. It's like saying in America that you live in a manufactured home is the word for it. A manufactured home, which is shorthand for you live in a trailer park.
Look, there is nothing wrong with portable buildings on dealerships. Turner's, has running a number of sites now, which essentially that concept. The new NZ cheap cars, which in no way has anything to do with Two Cheap Cars former ownership, uses a portable building on a site. There's nothing wrong with that setup, really. In fact, arguably, I think I need to go and talk to some of these relocatable building manufacturers and say, you really should be advertising these products to dealers.
I think, to be honest with you, Richard, I think judging by the number out there, dealers already know where to find them. Be a remarketing business for used portacoms off failed dealerships around New Zealand. Just relocate them to another piece of gravel. Plumb the wires in and away you go.
Oh, exactly. And how have you been, Graham? Have things been busy? The yard's not as empty as it was the last time we spoke?
Oh no, it's kind of fun. It's getting empty again. The business has been really odd, and we're on a bit of more of a serious note at the moment. But we're hearing a lot of doom and gloom stories out there. People are telling us that times are getting a bit tougher. We get just bombarded every single day by the media and talkback and the papers about how the economy's in dire straits and no one has any money and it's all over, and we basically might as well go and find our survival bunkers now. But people are spending money, and I don't think there's a lot of flood money being spent at the moment. It's just people are, I'm not quite sure if they figure that it's a good time to buy a vehicle. And I'm speaking for used here, I can't speak for new. Whether they feel that they should be spending their money while they've got it, whether they feel they shouldn't be buying a new vehicle, but they should be just updating themselves to just a reasonable used one. Whether they feel the price of petrol, for our example, is a better time to move into things like hybrids. I don't know, but it's been busy. It's been patchy, but it's been busy. There's no consistency to it. I hear stories from some dealers that are saying it's really quiet out there. Others are saying, look, we just can't pump enough vehicles through to keep up with demand. So it's patchy. And that's always a bit worrying in the trade, because what you really want is you want some sort of consistency. You want to know that whatever you do this week, you're going to do another 3 or 4 weeks' time, or 6 or 8 weeks' time, so you buy accordingly. But our industry right now, I don't think anyone really knows what the pattern's going to be in a couple of months. And that makes it really hard to pre-plan what you're going to purchase in Japan, where you're going to bring it down to, what sort of price points. Yes, look, put money into the turn today. That's great. But you've always got to be thinking steps ahead as to what will happen next.
Yeah, no, exactly. Now, before we get into the news, I'm gonna throw out there a couple of things. One is, Graham will tell you that AutoTalk has a somewhat wonderful lunch that we have on a semi-regular basis. Graham, lunch is good?
Yes, very, very industry gold standard.
Yes, Now, we have these on a semi-regular basis, and we have one coming up, and I've just come up with this on the spot. We have one coming up on Monday at White and Wong's downtown
Mm.
in Auckland. So I'm going to give away a seat. If someone is watching this and they want to join that lunch, then jump on email. Email me, richard at automediagroup.co.nz, with the name of the auction house that I said before that I am sitting in at the moment. Don't put it in the comments. Email it to richard@automediagroup.co.nz. And if we get someone come through who's able to do that, it's available in Auckland downtown from midday on Monday. You will get a all costs covered banquet menu at White and Wong's with the booze on tap and some good industry discussion. So let's see if anyone bites on that one, and we can get someone in the door along to that.
Tell you what, you should jump on that too. If you're watching, these have been fantastic opportunities. And Richard, I'll just sort of maybe pump up your tyres there a wee bit and say that these industry functions are not just a boozy Friday piss up for a bunch of dealers and gold chains. They've been instrumental in actually building relationships across the industry for the years that it's been going. People from all different aspects, new, used, financing, logistics. We've had government ministers attend. We've had people from all these different aspects, and it's a really good neutral ground to debate, discuss. Discussions can sometimes be heated, but everyone comes away from it, I think, good friends, good contacts, and what a fantastic forum for sharing what this whole industry actually is. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter which aspect we come from, we all deal in the same sort of products. So if you've got a chance to get that information from Richard, bang your details in on an email. I tell you what, you won't regret it. These are fantastic events.
Yes, yes. And it's going to be an interesting one, this one, because we have the departure of David Crawford. This is kind of going to be his last one maybe with us. The new MIA Chief Executive, Amy Wiley's going to be there. And of course, there'll be discussion around the fact that, and we'll go into this in the news, that David Vinson's departure from VIA is seemingly coming a little bit closer. It's been on the cards for a while, and we'll get to that in the news. Now, I just want to jump in first before we get into that, into some stuff we've had bubbling around this underneath the surface. It's in our magazine, which is going out today, so look out for that in your email. And that is Clean Car and what's going to happen with it closer to the election. Now, and this is not just Clean Car, but also emission standards. So we have had lots of discussion floating around about Clean Car. Will it change soon? We're going to get announcements soon about whether they're going to cut the subsidies or raise the levels or align it to change whether hybrids will fit in or so forth. And then secondly, we've had the discussion about whether the market's going to shift to Euro 5 for imports and Euro 6 for new vehicles. And I think there was some very beltway material that went out there in other sources, and we've put some stuff out as well in our titles indicating this stuff is happening. And then I saw a lot of discussion on Facebook amongst on our Facebook page and on other dealer-centric Facebook pages this week, worrying about it. You should be concerned, but I don't think anyone needs to panic that any of this stuff is going to happen overnight. And Graham, you may have a different take on this, but if there are changes to the Clean Car Standard, it isn't going to happen tomorrow. National running around saying they're going to drop it like a hot potato, nor is that going to happen tomorrow. Even if they get in, it's going to be a slightly slower process than that. So, yes, you do need to be considering what you are buying in the near future in relation to both of those changes. But I think when it does happen, you are going to get enough time for at least one or two buying cycles to not get yourself in the shtuck. Having said that, as we always see with these things, it's generally the dealers that you got two ways to go on this. You can either just start early, heading in the direction you think the market's going to go, and get there before anyone else, and learn some lessons, not necessarily make the big last minute gains, or you can push the market to the edge and pull down a whole pile of whatever you can land beforehand, and you can usually make a lot of money that way. But often you end up caught on the wrong side of history when the final line comes down or a ship's delayed or whatever. I guess that's everyone's own judgment call to make. But I think just when you see a lot of these scary headlines around at the moment, be very aware that both the industry organisations and the simple reality of politics and the way government works means that none of this stuff is going to happen overnight or even necessarily as the parties say it will. And I think I'm going to try and get Simeon Brown on the show at some point because, they've been very much cut the ute tax, but it's definitely not as simple as that. Is it a fair take on it, Graham? I know I've waffled and pontificated there, but
No, I think you're probably right, and you know probably as much as anybody else does, which we actually don't know. And if we've learned anything about bureaucracy in the last 5 or 6 years, it's that never predict what you cannot from this particular bureaucratic situation we find ourselves in. So the issue with clean car discount is it's probably going to be changed. We all acknowledge that we're so far out of kilter now that something's going to change. It's just a question of how you implement it. The values are kind of immaterial. It's how you implement it. And so in the case of the import marketplace, is it at border check? So you say, well, okay, this is your final border check for vehicles that you can import that are eligible for the old rating, if you like, under the old clean car discount scheme? Or is it a finite cutoff where you say, well, okay, in 3 months' time, and I think it would have to be a minimum of 3 months, and I'd argue probably longer than that, because right now logistics issues playing into hand and everything else we have to deal with, it can take 3 months from purchase in Japan to actually get a vehicle ready for sale on your yard, compliant in New Zealand. That's quite possible.
Well, let's clarify that over the broader sense of the market. We don't just talk to the used side here. The line in the sand that the MIA is generally drawn is that they need a minimum for their members of 7 to 8 months, because of course the supply chain for new vehicles is so much longer than used vehicles.
Yeah.
And I don't think the government really wants to be in a position where they basically end up screwing the industry with a bunch of cars they can't sell, or that they can only deliver with very high fees on them, basically.
Yeah, and again, I sort of started by saying I can only speak for used. New, I can actually, to be honest with you, I think new is going to be tougher, much tougher, because it's not just 6 to 8 months. I think some of the distributors are working on lead times of over a year for stock. And then, for example, what about stock that you have pre-sold that you've taken deposits on that's not being built for another 12 months? There are so many fish hooks with this, and this is always the problem with these things. No one ever thinks about the consequences downstream of either what you've enacted or change. And the clean car standard is just the same. How you unravel or how you modify the fact that you've now effectively been banking, or you've been buying on the fact that you're either banking carbon credits, or that you are already socking money away to pay for your debits downstream, and you've made a financial commitment to those in your balance sheet. Where do you even start? It's in some ways you're better off just saying status quo, because it's a known thing. You know my opinion on this. I dislike intensely the clean car standard scheme. I think the clean car discount scheme is, if I had my choice, is the one that I'd probably keep and I would leave in place, because it's easily understood and you can tweak it. Whereas clean car standard, you've now already entrenched dealers effectively and distributors into these long-term commitments around carbon. How do you unwind that? Where would you even start?
The problem being is that any political party that gets the ability to is going to try and unwind the discount, not the standard, because the public doesn't see the standard. The public doesn't care about the standard; they only care about the discount, and that is the reality. I think definitely we should try and get some in here. And well, this is the problem though, is that even in the commitments that both ACT and National are making in regards to cutting the stuff, they're not even calling it what it is. They keep using this term, the ute tax, which is wrong. They keep saying, this is just paying for cars for Teslas for rich people. Well, there's probably actually as much money has gone out to pay for Twitter Aquas for middle income people as has gone out to subsidize Teslas. So it's disingenuous, and it's dangerous to simplify what is a very complicated economic mechanism to describe it in the way it should.
So welcome to politics, where it doesn't matter what it is, you call it what you need to get the traction.
Exactly. So it's tricky. It's tricky. Anyway, let's move on to some news, and we kind of touched on this one earlier. Auckland-based VIA is seeking a Wellington-based chief executive. So VIA, of course, all well known to all of us as the kind of lead body for the imported vehicle industry, is seeking to replace David Vincent, who is retiring after over 20 years in the role. They are looking for someone this time, I think, part-time and Wellington-based. So they will lead the association, which is largely based out of Auckland, remotely from Wellington, the seat of government and home to key government agencies. They will lead a small but extremely capable team of experts and work remotely with the Industry Council to further VIA's mission of keeping the doors open for used imports. According to the listing, which is on Seek now if you're wanting to apply for it, the new CEO will help shape and guide the association's strategy and policy positions while engaging with industry leaders. They will also serve as the face and spokesperson of the industry, communicating VIA's message across industry and mainstream media platforms, such as me. Interesting to see that they're going for someone in Wellington, but somewhat expected. I mean, that's where the decisions are made, and I guess it's easier to have someone on the ground than paying someone to fly down a lot. Though you'd think with Zoom these days it would be pretty easy. And my understanding was now that a lot of the committee work, a lot of the government work is done by the very capable technical advisor, or policy analyst, Kit Wilkerson. Interesting move. You gonna put your hand up, Graham?
They probably wouldn't have me anyway, Richard. Let's be honest.
Yeah, it's.
I'm old rope now. I'm yesterday's news, yesterday's fish and chip wrapper. I will make a comment, and it not to be taken the wrong way, that I think it signals that VIA's well and truly moved away from what it used to be, and it's in dealer focus, and that was to be expected. I mean, the structure that was put in place, and I was part of putting that structure in, so I can't complain about it, was to move the power base away from the traditional dealers and bricks and mortar into the hands of the the supply chain that actually is largely funding the association, but also
you mean into the hands of the people that are actually paying the bills.
Yep, you got it. And that was evident for quite some time, even though dealers would like to think they supply, I suppose, the sentiment for the industry going forward. This to me signals that it's game over for the dealer sector. Yes, I know there'll still be support from some very, I would like to think, remaining capable people within the association, small little team they talk about, but I think there's been a growing disconnect between the dealers on the ground and the association of the last few years, and I think this is just another move away from that. It becomes a lobbying force, effectively just like MIA, where it's not representing the dealers as such on the ground, it's representing the distributors. If you think about the logistics organisations and the import chain as being our version of the distributors in New Zealand, and you do that a bit further, where in Australia you actually have two different associations. One represents the distributors, one actually represents the dealers, and they're quite diametrically opposed in some ways about how that actually operates. And this is a little bit like that. We're moving away from the dealer base, people that are doing things on the ground and what their needs are, to what the needs are of the broader industry that brings in motor cars.
I think it's interesting that we are seeing here the same thing that we saw with the MIA, and that there was maybe a little bit of discussion from some quarters about Kit Wilkerson taking the lead, in the same way that when the MIA went looking for a new CEO, there was some talk about Mark Stockdale being the kind of heir apparent. And they've kind of, and I think quite smartly, kept those two guys who are analyst and technical powerhouses as far as I'm concerned, very smart people, in a position to do their job, as opposed to having to deal with the bullshit, for want of a better word. And I think that's a smart move from both sides. Have the people who are good at doing the analysis work and the technical work and the thing in one seat, and those who have to deal with the glad handling and the campaigning and the talking to fools like me on the other side. Annoyingly, it means I've got two new chief executives to deal with at the same time, because it does take a wee while as a journalist to build a relationship with a new CEO of something like this. And generally over the years, I've had very good relationships. I think David's about my fourth chief executive or fifth chief executive of VIA/IMVA I've had to deal with. Amy Wiley, when she comes in, will be the third chief executive of the MIA I've had to deal with. And considering David Crawford was there for 20 years, that's nearly 20 years. No, nearly 20 years. Yeah.
Well, David Vincent is 20 years. He joined in 2002. David Crawford is later in the piece. He was post Perry.
Yes. So he's probably closer to a bit over a decade, I think. It's going to be an interesting time for just building those relationships for me. So Hi, Amy, and hi, whoever replaces David. I'll take you out for a coffee.
Well, a coffee, that's all we're good for these days. But it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, there's big change afoot in these associations, and not just the people that are behind them, but I think in how they represent themselves now. And again, I guess it shows that within the dealer industries, particularly used anyway, that we are far more now just instruments of a bigger supply chain process than we were 10 years ago, 20 years ago, where there was a lot more independence. And you can argue whether that's a good or a bad thing. If you sort of like the good old days, we used to go and, buy your own cars and stick your own cars on boats and you virtually pushing them onto the ship yourself. Maybe it's a sad day, but I think we have to face the reality that now most dealerships are simply an extension of a logistics supply chain in some form or another.
I guess here's the key thing in that, Graham, is are the dealers' wives or partners happier or less happier with the current modern situation?
Well, there's a trick question. Should we answer that, Richard? Is this a family show?
I'm just gonna leave that one there. Right.
Mic drop.
So on to the next story. The last chance for employer accreditation before 12-month system applies, and this one is an important one if you've got a workshop or if you're hiring salespeople overseas. The government decided last year to extend the initial accreditation period for the accredited employer work visa as a one-off to give employers more certainty while they get used to the accreditation system. AutoTalk has been running webinars on the subject. You can click the link after you go to AutoTalk, which could have major implications for New Zealand's automotive industry. Apply before July 4, 2023 to become an accredited employer and receive a 24-month accreditation if approved. First-time accreditation applications made after July 4, 2023 will only be for 12 months. So the short of that is basically that if you hire people on work permits, if you go and register for the new system now, you get 2 years. If you do it later, you're going to have to register every year. So I think it's worthwhile getting in there now. Save yourself a bit of money, save yourself a bit of hassle. Yeah, it's a simple one there. It's a no-brainer. The next one's slightly older story, but we'll talk about it anyway because it is interesting and I think a bit of a sad story. And that is 10 girls allegedly smash showroom cars. Well, not allegedly, they smashed them.
Of course they
nearly 20 vehicles along with computers and furniture were damaged after 2 girls allegedly broke into a Whangarei dealership, media reports. More cars. Northland Kiev owner Stephen Moore said 19 cars were vandalised during the break-in, which happened about 1 a.m. on March 22nd. Moore and a security company monitoring the business were alerted to a disturbance at the vehicle yard, with Moore reportedly saying he was surprised to find 2 girls who he was later told were aged 13 and 15. He intends upgrading the dealership security system after the incident. Police confirmed they took one teenage girl into custody while another was taken to hospital with minor injuries attributed to the break-in. The matter was referred to youth aid. Some of the damaged cars were already sold, which means that customers had to wait to get their vehicles, or I hope they'll get their vehicles, or they'll end up getting new ones. Not great. That would be utterly devastating, particularly for a small regional city dealership.
And they'll be known. I'm just getting my wet bus ticket out because they're going to sort of slap my hand on the wrist because that's all they're going to get because they're referred to youth aid and we've actually been through this process a few years ago. I don't know if anyone else on here has, but it's frankly insulting. And you sit around a table and they talk about how good little Johnny is and how little Johnny was really a good little boy. And he just had a bad moment with his Weet-Bix that spilled over the edge of his plate that morning. And he'd normally be really good. And he has all the backup of the family and all the families behind him. And the adjudicator or the community response organizer says, yes, well, I think actually we should give Johnny another good little chance. I really think he's bullshit. And you know what? Yep. I think most of New Zealand now, this is not the car industry, let's get a bit more honest here. Most of New Zealand right now is saying exactly that, looking down at what's going on and the response we're getting from the courts and from the community advisors and from the families and the whānau and everyone else involved in all these things. And they're saying, bullshit. They're little shits. Start dealing with it. Start dealing with it with the bottom up, because it could be you next, it could be our business next, and it appears to be absolutely nothing that anyone appears to want to do to try and stop it.
Tell us how you really feel, Graham.
Yeah, would you like me to?
Next
But,
story.
it's true. 13 years old. 13. Anyway.
Evans takes the helm at McLaren Auckland. The Giltrip Group has appointed Simon Evans as the new brand manager for McLaren, based in its exclusive showroom on Great North Road at Grey Lynn, Auckland. Evans has worked for the Giltrip Group for more than 12 years. He's also a professional driver for Smeg Racing and a driving instructor for Downforce events. The son of land speed record holder Owen and the brother of Formula E driver Mitch, Evans has successfully raced in many different motorsport categories in New Zealand and overseas. Most notably, he was the Season 2 winner of the Jaguar I-Pace E-Trophy Series in 2020 before it wrapped up permanently. Great appointment there. I've driven with Simon a couple of times at corporate events. Great guy, smart operator, and I think it's really smart for a company like that to have, because I think he was in their Audi, the Giltrip Audi business, to have someone who understands what these vehicles can do, selling them. And also great, again, just to see the ongoing effort that the Giltraps and other people within the industry put into assisting these young racers out there. It's great to see that it's turning from not just support, but into a genuine career for some of these guys now, thankfully. So that's cool. Now, on to another luxury brand. Bespoke dealer event raises funds for cyclone victims. As part of a bespoke event in the Hawke's Bay, the first of its kind, hosted by Rolls-Royce Motor Cars Auckland, a fundraising component helped those impacted locally by Cyclone Gabrielle. It was the first such corporate event to be held in the all-new Atrium Tribune development, where the latest Rolls-Royce Phantom and Rolls-Royce Ghost motor cars were displayed for viewing. The team from Rolls-Royce Motor Cars Auckland hosted more than 80 guests with champagne, gin, cocktails, and a seafood bar, and they were treated to live music from local artist Arahi. So, great to see a dealer there using their Rolls-Royces and some gin to peel some money out of the well-to-do people around the Hawke's Bay to help cyclone victims. Did you get an invite, Graham?
No, but there's another point to the story that I think is worth mentioning. I think Rolls-Royce, there was a fair bit of social media flack around that event. And I don't know if you caught up with it or not, but there was a lot of the usual Karens out there talking about how it was just such a bad look to be having an event for, rich Aucklanders and Queenstownites. Hawke's Bay's just suffered from a massive calamity, and just to be down here flaunting your wealth is ostentatious. And it did the rounds, and all the usual people sort of clamber on board with their 10 cents worth of worthless opinion. And I thought it was really well managed, actually, the responses back about the fact that not only had the Hawke's Bay, or not the entire Hawke's Bay, had been dismantled, but that events like this were still able to take place, was bringing income into the area. It gave the various hosting organisations, the catering, the staff, it gave them employment, it gave them a really good opportunity. It was actually putting stuff back into a community that desperately needs not just donated money and food, but it actually needs to get itself back on its feet economically with business. And I thought it was really well handled, the rebuttal back to, I suppose, fend off those who have nothing better to do that complain about everything and anybody. Well played. But it did get a bit tetchy there for a little while on social media.
People need to get that money is handy in these situations.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you're an event manager, what are your staff doing? They're at events, right? That's what they do. If all the events are cancelled, you get the idea.
Yeah, exactly. Some people just don't think about that kind of stuff. It's, rich people are bad.
Yeah. Oh, I'm really sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, another one, and this is a story we're going to talk about it in a way that's not necessarily what it refers from the story. More Tesla price cuts. Tesla has reduced its New Zealand prices for the third time in 4 months. Big price drops put the Tesla Model 3 rear-wheel drive from about $65,900, previously $68,900, plus on-road costs, and the Model Y rear-wheel drive at $70,900, previously $73,900, putting them well in contention for the $8,625 clean car discount rebate. There's more of the story on EVs and beyond, but that's not really what I want to discuss today. The big issue around this is, man, Tesla really wants to break the industry in some way, because they are the values of Teslas are just seemingly really a bit of a problem. I mean, for a start, the price of those cars has come down several $1,000s over the course of the last 6 months. That has not been a happy experience for those lease companies that got out there and helped fleets get into the electric cars, as fleets want to do.
Yeah.
They're now sitting there looking at it going, and the number of vehicles that are being dumped back into the market by Tesla and others, particularly Model 3s as people have switched to Model Ys, is having a really strong effect. You can get a relatively low mileage 2019 Model 3 on retail at the moment for under $40,000. Which, considering that those cars, 3 years ago, it's like a 45% drop, 50% drop. In a market like this,
significant residual drop, isn't it?
That's a lot. And the silly thing is that it doesn't have to be that way. Though that residual is dropping so fast because Tesla keep dropping the prices. And it doesn't even matter how much they drop the prices for it by. It's the signal of dropping the prices. And I get what they're doing by doing it, and that they, want to make EVs affordable, and they want the cars to be good value, and so on and so forth. They want to keep their stock moving. But at the same, and that appeals and brings new people in. But the problem being
Richard.
but the problem
you didn't fall down the last shower with that line, did you?
Yeah. But the problem being is that they are basically just flushing their existing customers down the toilet by doing it.
Yeah. Sorry, carry on.
So the question is, do they want them to come back? And I assure you, some of those lease companies will be looking very seriously at how they price their Tesla leases the next time they renew, if they are willing to do it at all.
So if you were cynical like me, you'd say it's nothing to do with what you just said before. But there's two factors, actually three. One of which is the competition from the Chinese manufacturers. They've read the room, and they've seen that the likes of particularly BYD, with the MG products we talk about, that some of the other stuff coming through now from the likes of LDV and in the commercial sector, they're saying, there's definitely competition. It's a lot cheaper, and it's starting to make inroads into what they would consider perhaps their premium fleet marketplace. So this is a response back to it. There's also been an awful lot of flack of late about the profit that Tesla make on each individual vehicle. Forget about the profit of Tesla overall. But it's been well broadcast about just how much money Tesla make on each individual vehicle they're currently selling. And so perhaps some backlash to that, saying, well, we're not quite as greedy a car companies would like you to think.
I actually think a lot of those reporting of how much Tesla makes per vehicle is utter bullshit. It's
bullshit all around, then, isn't it?
Yeah, because if they're making that much money per vehicle, I don't and considering the length of their model cycles, I don't understand how they just don't seem to actually make more money as a company as such. So there's a disconnect there between what, let's be blunt, YouTube pundits are saying they're making per vehicle versus what the actual economic reality is. And because of the nature of the way way Tesla shares are treated out there by the market, I think there's a lot of misinformation around their economics. If we put all that aside, I just think that this is bad business. And look, you could argue it's market manipulation, that some companies will, and we all know they do it. There are distributors out there that will hold back trade-in and ex-rental stock and ex-lease stock and meter its re-entry to the market in order to not tank the market. You could argue that's market manipulation. You could argue that's keeping its prices high. You could also argue that that's keeping lease costs down and making sure that people who bought their product are not left in the lurch holding a vehicle that is valueless because of oversupply. And I think the happy medium needs to be somewhere in between, but certainly it's not as clear as what Tesla has done here.
Nope.
No. So yeah, it's a tricky one, that one. But yes, I have to say, still happy with my BYD. Really loving my BYD.
Not going to rush out and trade it in on a Model 3, Richard? A dual motor Model 3? It's a good time to buy. Never been a better time to buy.
Now, let's yeah, well, I mean, that's right. It's who knows. Let's fire through a few more stories, because we're getting a fair way on here, and we'll run through them. This one's not exactly, I think, big news, because it's been known for a while and they've been doing it for a long time. But The local evaluation of luxury Lexus Genesis EV sedan confirmed. Basically, someone spotted a Hyundai Genesis GV80 outside Hyundai's Auckland headquarters. Of course, Genesis is Lexus's equivalent from Hyundai, kind of their luxury spin-off. They have been here before and gone away, but they still sell in Australia, and I think interesting to see that they are looking at those. They've said no confirmation at the moment. Uber to invest 7.5 million in New Zealand EV adoption. So basically, Uber's doing a deal with its drivers here, where if you go and switch to a fully electric vehicle, they will halve your service fee for the first 2 years, up to $5,000 per year. So basically, you're a driver who goes and switches to an EV, you'll get 10 grand from Uber over 2 years, which is a pretty interesting offer. So that
I can do you a good deal on some Tesla 3s if they're interested.
Yes, well, exactly. It doesn't say this to be new. Yep. Well, so if you take that $40,000 Tesla Model 3 and then go and take then that becomes a $30,000 Tesla Model 3 after 2 years. Even better. Anyway, and then one for those Ute lovers, and just so you can have a wee drool, Graham. Toyota Hilux GR Sport has been revealed and priced. The new high-performance Toyota Hilux GR Sport was on show at the recent Toyota Gazoo Racing Festival in Cromwell. And although it's yet to hit New Zealand roads, expected in May, I believe I'm driving one about then, priced at $74,990. So this is a kitted out wide-body Toyota Hilux. I believe it's got about 10% more power out of the same diesel engine. So unfortunately for those who think it's a Raptor competitor, it's about 100 and something kilowatts shy and 100 and something Newton meters shy of being a Raptor.
So just a little bit.
Just a little bit, but still pretty cool. I think that's actually a really nice looking truck. And hopefully that'll just keep a little bit of excitement bubbling while they wait for the much long awaited new Hilux, which we're still not sure when that will arrive. Does that turn your Ute crank, Graham, that Hilux?
No, it's still a bit of, Ute longings every now and then. It looks very American, but then they all do these days. That's the whole point. They look very American, don't they?
I like the good old-fashioned white lettering on the tyres. I think that looks good.
That's a hangover from our days of being petrol heads and rotaries, and we had SF330 Eagers that you'd painstakingly use a white marker pen to highlight the SF330 Eager bit. If you know, you know.
Now, our last story of the day is one actually from Australia, and I feel like this one might. I think I have a feeling what your reaction is going to be to it, Graham. And that is Cars24. Cars24 is a online used vehicle dealer in Australia. They basically hold all their stock not at a retail yard. You shop it online. It gets delivered on the back of a truck, and you can send it back. They are claiming that Aussie used car dealers are making a 30% margin. Graham, before we read the story, BS or truth?
I think it's probably quite true in many cases. I think the used car market in Australia is overinflated. And that's one of the reasons why I've been working with AIMVIA for all this time, is there's just been, I think, a sense that the Australian used car market in general is a law unto itself. It's overinflated, it's overpriced, it's not necessarily doing any favours for consumers. And there was a need for the imported sector to slide into the middle somewhere and actually inject a dose of reality into it. Because right now, let's face it, they've got it under complete and total control. It's like Tesla owning the market over there.
Mm. So, online used vehicle cars retailers opened a new $5 million refurbishment centre on a 5-acre site in Leverton, Victoria, Australia, which it claims will process 1,200 vehicles when at full scale. The company claims it will spend no less than $2,000 per each vehicle. How can you say that? What if you get a car that comes in that's perfect? What the heck are you going to do to it? But says the average used car dealer in Australia spends $500 on a vehicle before selling it at a 30% margin. The company did not reveal its own profit margin after investment. Cars24 says its high-tech mega refurbishment lab, MRL, will create up to 150 jobs for the automotive industry and provide end-to-end car refurbishments for customers nationwide, guaranteeing quality, safety, and overall peace of mind at an affordable price.
There's a whiff to this, isn't there?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of generalization going on there, and I think that there's some comments there which perhaps dangerously indicate a lack of a knowledge of how even their own business works.
Well, lest you have to go and prove it. Well, as we know, a good comparator in the Australian mainstream media are never shy on shall we say, inflationary headlines. And if you're one that provides the headlines, there's not really, let's say, a fact checker going into these sort of things in the front end, is there? So
But so
we'd
so
expect
so
nothing
so,
less.
so you've probably seen this, Graham. Grandma rumbles onto the yard in her 5-year-old Twitter Corolla that has been driven all of 20,000 k to church on Sunday and
Hmm.
perfectly serviced and doilies on the seats and so forth. It's in great condition. You trade it in. You send her out the door in her bright yellow sports kitted Toyota Aqua. What? How do you find $2,000 to spend on it? You're not going to do that. That's just dumb business. You slap a sticker on it and you put it out the door again.
Quick wipe over with the chamois, black the tyres. And, before anybody says, oh, that sounds a bit facetious, well, you're right. What are you going to do? I mean, if you've got a product that's really good to start with, unless you've got some really creative accounting going on in the background, let's not talk about that. Maybe, I don't know, but he's certainly stretching.
The danger of this almost is in the. And I'll go back to a story years ago. A vehicle, and I think what happened more than once. A vehicle brand in New Zealand that I shall not name developed their own refurbishment centre at their headquarters to rebuild or to refurbish used vehicles or import vehicles to their corporate standard, and they gave it up after not a long amount of time because they realized that they were doing it totally wrong. And being a new car company, what they were doing was refurbishing their cars to a new car standard, not to the standard that customers wanted to have their car refurbished to when they were buying a used car. And so they were spending a fortune on these cars and making them far better than they needed to. Whereas what they did was then shift the program into the hands of the dealers who understood, who aren't
Yeah.
spending less because they want to spend less, but they understand what they need to spend to get the car to the point where it will sell.
You
And
can actually overspend. You can actually overdo a car.
yeah,
It is actually possible. And you get to that point where the customer looks at it and says, "Well, hang on a minute. What exactly am I paying for here?"
yeah. And I wonder if this case is perhaps if they're pitching it in that way, that maybe they're going to end up overdoing it. So yeah, it's an interesting model, Cars 24. Jump online, and have a look at it. I'm not saying it's a bad business. I feel like they've been a bit cheeky in what they've said here. I don't think they really have any idea what dealers do actually spend on refurbishing cars. And
Well, sometimes neither do the public either. To be fair, I mean, we've look in a business that I shall not name, but I happen to know. Maybe we've had a customer a few months ago now who was it was a really late model car, really, really good details, so I'm told. And it was like, there's a small little, I don't know, there was a little scratch somewhere underneath the bottom. He said, look, the brand new cars like this one, they're over there. They're just up the road over there. That's where they sell the brand new ones. What you need to do is go and buy the brand new one. I'm like, oh, well, we don't want to spend that sort of money. So, okay, then this is where the used ones are. Oh, but that's why you go and buy the brand new one. That's the brand new car store for the brand new car price. Oh, I want to buy so sometimes I think consumer sentiment gets caught up in that too. But you're right. I think the dealers who deal with the people that buy the things know best what the people want.
yeah.
Lesson learned.
Now going back to the Tesla discussion, bring it back around this rounded circle. It's an interesting little thing in the. I think we discussed it before in the new car market, in regards to these electric vehicles, in that electric vehicles drag in new car buyers on a level that is unseen by any other model. Maybe you might see that for Suzuki or some of the challenger Chinese brands. People who've never bought a new car before, it's their
Yep.
first new car, and that is actually a bit of a problem at the dealer end, in that because this is the first time these people have spent this much on a car, it's their first new car. It's this big thing. It's generally been found, and I've heard many, and this is anecdotal, but I've heard many stories around this, that their expectations of what the car is at delivery is higher than what a typical new car buyer is. And that comes from a couple of reasons. a new car buyer, a traditional new car buyer who has well cashed up or whatever and can afford the vehicle is going to go in there, and it's not their biggest thing they're ever going to buy, so they're not panicking quite so much if they see that there's a tiny little blemish on one of the windows, or the seatbelt was slightly crooked when they pulled it out for the first time, or in one case I know there was a tiny scuff on the underside of the car where the car had been picked up on a hoist during PD. The other aspect to that is that I don't know what's going on that second one, but anyway, so there is so we've got to the point now where there are groups online for these guys who are buying these electric vehicles. It's their first electric vehicle, first new vehicle, and they're going in with check sheets to mark off and inspect the vehicle before taking them away, which I find incredibly amusing and interesting, and yeah. But it's the whole new car buyer thing from EVs is true. I mean, I had never bought a new car until 3 years ago, and now I bought 2 new cars because they're electric vehicles. So yeah, it's interesting. But
you're not a good judge of that because you work in the industry, so you sort of see this sort of stuff every day. Your expectations are completely changed. But I think there's a good point there that people entering the market for the first time buying a brand new car. My parents-in-law bought their first brand new car a few years ago. They bought 2 now, and it was part of the experience was just they wanted to buy a brand new car. Before the old story, before I can't drive anymore, I'd like to own a brand new car. And so the expectation I think they have of that particular process was reasonably high. I think it was higher than it would have been if you just bought a new car every 2 years, traded it, and got the next one, got the next one. And it's not that you're buying crap. It's just that I don't quite know what it is that you expect. Tricky one, very tricky indeed.
I got to say, for anyone who hasn't done it, and I do highly recommend the value in used import vehicles. The experience of buying a new car is lovely with the right dealership. Maybe not ones that we've spoken about recently in regards to Mustangs, but certainly it is when done right. And look, to be honest, like I've taken our last 2 new cars I took prior as industry. We just grabbed them, demonstrated, and then did the deal, so on and so forth. But I had my wife do the actual new car delivery experience even after we had all the cars already, because it is such a cool thing. And it is nice, and it is special, and it is a bit of a reward as part of the process. And it's certainly an interesting thing we're finding with these new to the industry new car buyers that use cars.
So I'll tell you a very short little story that Richard, that illustrates this perfectly. Back in a previous lifetime, I lived in LA, and my then girlfriend and I went new car shopping. And we spent 2 days trawling all the dealers. If you're familiar with LA, most of there's this vast area, Thousand Oaks, out in the sort of the nether end of the valley. It's just mile after mile of vast franchise dealerships. We spent 2 days trawling, looking for a new car. She didn't know what she wanted, just wanted a new car, certain price point. And most of the dealers, honestly, they were just dirtbags. They really were. And it was all, looking for a car for the little lady, your son, was the little lady want to drive? And they were just pigs. And the very last dealership we visited on the last day was Saturn. This tells you how long ago the story was. And the Saturn experience was so completely different in the way they treated her and us. And then the delivery process, they literally led us, when we came to try and pick the car up, led us down a corridor past the big wall of fame with all the photos, everyone with a new car, into a big showroom with a big revolving floor. All the dealership staff came out, right from the guy that has the little leaf blower and the cleaner and the lady that makes the tea, and they all came out in a big circle around, and they chanted this song and did this big war dance sort of stuff, and then big, confetti and balloons and stuff, and there's a new car rotating around and she felt about $1 million. It taught me a really valuable lesson that I've never forgotten about how people like us, when we buy things like this, how we want to be treated and how good it makes us feel. It's just a car. It was a Saturn SC2 coupe. It wasn't like it was anything particularly special, but the experience was absolutely amazing. It didn't cost them any more for it. And
that was Saturn's whole shtick. I mean, the cars themselves were nothing to talk about. They were GM parts bin specials, largely Opel based with, some various bits in them. They were very much nothing special. But heck, in fact, during their later days, they were selling rebadged Captivas just to
Yeah. Yeah, it didn't work out so well towards the end. But the funny thing was that she forgave many of its initial ills, and there were initial ills. She forgave all of them because the experience of having it in the first place and how she'd been treated was just so good that how could you possibly complain about it?
Did that coupe have little suicide doors at the back, if I remember rightly?
No, it was a two-door coupe with a sunroof. I know this because I hung out of it filming on Route 66 about a week later on a tour we did across through to Texas in it.
So Saturn was interesting. So their sales force comprised actually some weird things. So they basically paid people within colleges to direct sell the vehicles, and then those people who did really well at that, they would move into their sales team at the dealerships. And the dealerships, they really put a focus on, I think it was like a minimum 50% female sales mix, and they really pushed for sales staff and customer service staff under 30, younger. They were really pitching for that kind of young brand thing. Though ironically, I think ultimately the brand ended up having a really weird older customer skew. So yeah, who knows? But yeah, it got canned.
Yeah. And not even collectible anymore either. And she smashed it up after a year anyway, so.
And got another one?
I don't know. I'd left her by then.
Oh, right. Anyway, enough said. Look, thank you so much for joining us. As we said, if you are still listening, we're nearly an hour in. Don't forget to go back to the start, listen to where that auction house is behind me, and email to richard@automediagroup.co.nz. If anyone emails, I'll pick one and get someone along to our lunch on Monday. Graham, I will see you on Monday at that lunch.
You will indeed. Happy weekend, everyone.
And we'll catch everyone else next week on the AutoTalk Weekly Wrap. I'll actually be on holiday, but I'll take half an hour out for a wee catch-up with the industry. Catch you later.